Welcome to this lecture. We have taken a look at how we can create volumes and attach them over to our instances. Now we're going to be looking at how we can create what is called a snapshot and then launch a volume based off of that snapshot. Now, what exactly is a snapshot? You can treat it sort of like a picture that you take using a camera. Now, here we have a specific volume. This volume over the time is going to be accumulating data. It's going to be having different configurations that we set. For example, we have the encrypted configuration here. It's going to be having the different settings that we set. It's going to have different installations of software onto this volume, so on and so on. Now, when we go to take a snapshot, it's going to take all of those settings, all of those configurations, all of that data into account. It's going to replicate that data. It's going to copy that data over to a new data location, and it's going to store that as a snapshot of that volume. So in a specific point in time, it's going to store that volume's information. And the way that you will be using the snapshot is, say, when you want to launch a volume that is supposed to act sort of like the previous version of the new volume you have. So for example, you want to restore back to a previous version, you can do that. If you want to create a template volume, you can also do that using this snapshot. So you do all of your configurations, all the settings that you want, and all the basic data that you want to specify to every single volume that you might be creating. Create a snapshot of this, and then create the volumes using those snapshots so that all the information is preloaded. Let's see how we can create a snapshot in the snapshot section here. Let's go over to create snapshot. And in the create snapshot, we're going to be looking at the specific volume. The volume that we're going to be working with is the EEA2B volume. This was the additional volume that we had added. Let's specify a name for this snapshot. We're going to say something like snapshot underscore 01. Description, let's just copy this over. And here we have our snapshot information. You can see the encrypted setting is automatically picked up from that specific volume. So this is the volume that we had added on afterwards. The root volume actually does not have automatic encryption. You have to go ahead and download some sort of software which is going to allow you to do that encryption for you. We can go over to create. You can see the creation is processing, and we have completed the creation of our snapshot. The reason this is so fast is because currently we don't have much data inside our volume that we have created, so it's going to be completing really fast. However, the first time you create a snapshot, oftentimes it takes a lot of time, so it's going to be transferring over all the settings, configurations over to a new location, and that's going to be taking time. Over the process of working with your EBS volumes and snapshots, you're actually going to be updating a specific snapshot with more settings that have occurred inside that specific EBS volume. For example, if there has been a change in the EBS volume, you can update your snapshot, and in that case, it's only going to be changing the values and the settings that have changed in your EBS volume, and the amount of time it takes at that point is going to be a lot less than the initialization time. However, here it took a very small amount of time since we had basically nothing to copy over. Now we have created our snapshot. If we want to create a volume using this snapshot, it's quite simple. We go over to actions, go over to create volume. We can actually create an image as well. So if we took a snapshot of the root volume had the OS installed, it had the packages installed, it had the software installed. And we could create our own AMI, which we use to then launch the instances. So we can launch a T2 microsystem using the AMI that we create. So that is a very, very powerful tool, and we can sort of create templates and then use those templates to launch our own systems. We'll be seeing that in a later lecture. For now, let's click on create volume. Here you're given information about the snapshot ID. So this is the snapshot ID we'll be using in order to create our volume. We have the general purpose SSD volume here, 8 gigabytes. Availability zone. This is one thing we did not touch in the previous lecture. Let's just explain to you what this is. So if you think about what Amazon does, is Amazon is going to be spreading out all of its different data warehouses into different regions. So we have a West region in the US, we have other regions in the US as well. Currently, I'm using the Oregon region, and you have California, all of those regions available to us. In those regions, you're going to be having different availability zones. Availability zones are actually the real data warehouses that are there. A region is basically sort of like a theoretical grouping of those availability zones. It's not a real thing. It is just a grouping of that so that you can understand, oh, I'm storing in this region so that it's going to be providing me all of the services for this region. I should use this specific region and store all of my instances there. The availability zones are the real data warehouses that are working behind. So if you specify, say, 2A every single time, if 2A fails, all of your data is gone. So if you want to store backups of the disk that is in 2A, you would want to store it in 2B. You want to spread it across different availability zones and maybe even spread it across different regions, so on and so on. Here, let's go ahead and do the creation. Volume successfully created. Click close, and let's go over to our volumes. In the volumes, you can see the new volume is available. Now this volume we can remember to attach to our specific instance that we have. Let's go over to attach, click on instance, go over to attach, and you can see all of these three volumes are now being used by our instance, and we have one root volume and we have these two more volumes that we have added on to our instance. So thank you for joining me here on this lecture. We saw how we can create what is called a snapshot of our volume, which allows us to copy over all of the information stored on that volume. And then what we can do is we can launch more volumes from that information, and it's going to create replicas of the volume that we have used to create this template. And we can use that to have a backup or restore back to a previous version or launch more EPS volumes based on the information that is there on the snapshot. So thank you for joining me again. Let's go along to the next lecture.